Welcome to the Workforce Connections podcast, where we discuss workforce development in Southern Nevada. Here's your host.
So I want to welcome you, Manny, and welcome our audience to another episode of Workforce Connections podcast. Super excited to be here with you. I've known you for some years now, so looking so forward to sharing this time with you and hearing your great thoughts about the things we're going to discuss today. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Just a special guest to us all the way from D.C.
Yes.
A NAGA double gold champion, right? The North American Grappling Association double grand champion. So you're impressive, at a very personal level, professional level, obviously, and even athletically, we always have fun.
I know, exactly.
So thanks for being here, man. Really, really appreciate it. I know right now you're serving as the advisor to the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration. Want to just get a chance to talk about that here in a second. But, as we start this off, I want to ask you, because you were here in Nevada, now you're in D.C., right?
Right.
What were some of your greatest memories, of being here in Nevada when you were here during that time?
Absolutely. Thank you. First, I'll just say thank you for inviting me. It's a super pleasure to be here. Go way back, but more importantly, in terms of we've done really good work in terms of workforce when I was here. So currently I'm a senior advisor at the Department of Labor, the Employment and Training Administration. Before I kind of go into that, but I'll go to your specific question in terms of some great memories. There's quite a few, especially being here. I was in Vegas for quite a while, for about 7 years. But in terms of some of the workforce work, one that stands out to me actually is when we did the youth conference here. And the reason why it stands out as a great memory was because there was a strong collaboration, the governor's workforce conference for youth. And the reason why that stood out to me for a variety of reasons. But I think the main one is that there was a strong partnership element. So this was where we had the Metro Chamber of Commerce, who, I know is a good partner, is a great partner here. We had labor involvement. We had a workforce, particularly the local workforce board, Workforce Connections, working with Jaime, yourself, Irene, and others. And we had businesses engaged. And I remember specifically at that conference, we were getting people excited about the possibility of opportunities for getting young people to work and getting career pathways, getting them into career pathways, meaningful career pathways. And, people were really excited. I remember we had the superintendent involved. We had quite a few people engaged. So I think on the workforce side, that stood out to me because then what led after that was not just, it wasn't just about the excitement, but it led to tangible outcomes. And what the tangible outcomes were commitment by businesses and employers to explore work-based learning. It was the work-based learning conference. And it was engaging and connecting on what the possibilities of pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeships. Yeah. It was exploring about on the policy side, how can we advance and work together to compete at the federal funds for apprenticeships, and we were successful in doing those kinds of things. So I think on the professional level, that was one of my greatest memories because of all the different stakeholders that came together. The conference went without a hitch, and it led to very concrete deliverables and commitments that were followed up on. So I think that really stands out.
Awesome. No, thank you for sharing that, man. I think we share a mutual passion for our youth in our community. I could sit here and talk to you all day about youth and the work that we've done, that I remember us doing together. Now that you're doing it at a national level, so you're on to, doing some great things. Speaking of that, tell us about your new role as senior advisor for the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. So share about that. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So I'll just say, just on a high level, just the mission first of ETA. So the Employment and Training Administration really is the Department of Labor, within the Department of Labor, is really to contribute to a more efficient function of the labor market. And they do that through job training, high quality job training, employment, income assistance, services, and pathways. So there's really the core mission of Employment and Training Administration. And I'm particularly excited about my role because a lot of the work that I did here in Nevada, I'm able to see at the federal level. So when I was in Nevada, I was the governor's designee on the state workforce board, and I oversaw the state apprenticeship system here. And Now at the federal level, my current role is working really closely with some amazing colleagues and staff around workforce development. And that includes everything from registered apprenticeships. How can we expand, diversify, and modernize registered apprenticeships in all occupations, particularly non-traditional occupations? I have some examples of successes that already I can share with. And quite frankly, the administration's commitment to registered apprenticeships and our secretary's commitment. Our secretary comes from a background of apprenticeships and understands it well. The administration has invested over $300 million already in registered apprenticeships. And I'll also talk about the sector strategies. That's another component of my portfolio, looking at how can we align, work together to really coalesce both public and private partners to really develop sector strategies. WIOA, of course, engaging a lot around WIOA and engagements there. And then quite a few other things too. And I always like to say that asterisk, other duties as assigned. But for me, it keeps it fun, keeps it engaging as well. But yeah, it runs a gamut, but mainly apprenticeships, workforce more broadly, sector strategies, engagement, industry engagement, TAA, and then just broader kind of workforce strategy. And on the policy side too, just everything on the policy side at the federal level with workforce. Yeah. So.
Awesome. I'll ask you a question here about apprenticeships here in a second, but I know you've always been that kind of guy, the mix here and the mix there. I mean, you're a hardworking individual. I mean, I've always admired and respected your work ethic, so I'm not surprised, right? I'm not impressed in the sense of, I didn't know that about Manny, I mean, you're really a person who really wants to make the greatest impact, I think, in whatever role you fill. And I see you, Manny, as an individual who wants to make the greatest impact just in your lifetime, and so thank you for the work that you're doing, the influence that you're having, on a national level. I know Nevada, is your heart, right? And so thank you for doing things that allow us to kind of get things going here in a great way.
Thank you.
You mentioned apprenticeship programs. Let me ask you this, Manny. How do businesses access support and resources to initiate apprenticeships in their organizations?
Absolutely. So this is a really good question. Appreciate that question. I'll start both on the kind of national in terms of some of the specific things that we've been doing and businesses across the board should be aware of. And then I'll talk specific to some examples. So in the big picture, some really good things and that we've been investing in for apprenticeship for businesses to think about. We've invested in what we call intermediaries. So we actually have 16 intermediaries, and intermediaries are organizations in particular sectors that are literally focused on supporting businesses, develop scale apprenticeship programs across the country in any state. They could reach out to them. We have technical assistance centers that that DOL, ETA, within the Office of Apprenticeship fund. The technical assistance center. So we have the intermediaries. The intermediaries are they look at particular sectors, whether it's cybersecurity, and so on and so forth. We have technical assistance centers. So technical assistance centers, they look at particular functions such as DEIA. So for example, we've funded Job for the Future. They're a technical assistance center for DEIA. So if a business is looking really to think about incorporating DEIA, they could reach out to one of our technical assistance center. And again, all of those are free. The intermediaries, the technical assistance centers, all of those are free support. Another component is really working closely with our states and our federal office staff. As you may know, and as some businesses may or may not be aware of, but when you want to register and develop a registered apprenticeship program, depending on what state you are in, about half the states are what we call SAA, which is they have a state apprenticeship agency. Mm-hmm. So when I was in Nevada, we had the state apprenticeship agency. I was overseeing that. And to register a program, you go through your state apprenticeship agency. But depending on what state you're in, you have Office of Apprenticeship. They call them OA states. And so you work directly with the Federal Office of Apprenticeship to develop, scale, and register your programs. Additionally, we've developed, and I think this is an important piece in terms of what we've done for businesses to be able to scale registered apprenticeship programs and develop them, is we've launched a whole slew of online tools where they can work and develop registered apprenticeships on their own. And so, for example, we have a partner finder tool where you can go online right now and go to apprenticeship.gov and go to our resources, and you'll see Partner Finder where you could find other partners. So you might be looking for, I'm really looking for a business that does my kind of work. How can I connect with them? We have an occupation finder. You can look for a particular occupation that you're looking to develop a registered apprenticeship in. And we also what we call standard builders now, where as you develop a registered apprenticeship program, you have to develop those standards. And right now online, you can go online and start developing those standards of a registered apprenticeship program online, and then working with your state apprenticeship agency and your or the Office of Apprenticeships. We can also work if you're a business that have a national footprint or a regional footprint. We have what you call national guideline standards and national program standards. For that, we specifically, you can work with us to help develop those national guideline standards. So national guideline standards are essentially a framework where businesses work to develop those framework for their organization, and then they would then take that to their particular state to get those approved. But you also have national program standard if there's a business with a national footprint and it's the same program, essentially the same organization, where they could develop a national program. And for those, you would work directly with us. So we have both investments. We've invested $130 million for what we call Apprenticeship Building America. And those funds have gone to community colleges, states, as well as partners on the ground to scale registered apprenticeship with a particular look at pre-apprenticeship for young people, and pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship, as well as looking at how we can incorporate equity and career pathways. So there's an investments, there's specific strategic engagements, there's tools that we've mentioned. And then the final thing I'll mention is that if you're specific in Nevada, in addition to all of those resources are still available to you, by the way, if you're specifically in Nevada. But I'll even add for where Nevada's an SAA, you can work with the state apprenticeship agency, again, to provide you free technical assistance to develop those programs. So really in this instance, really working with the state apprenticeship agency as well to develop those. Now, if I may, I'll add some quick example, because I just can't, without taking the opportunity to provide some examples of how we've done it in other sectors too. And everyone knows registered apprenticeship is really a hallmark, in registered apprenticeship, quite frankly, was around even before the 1936 or 37 National Apprenticeship Act, right? It really was around even before that. And it's been really successful when it's done well, and it has a lot of success in the trades. In addition to that, registered apprenticeships can be done in a whole variety of sectors. So like I've been to Switzerland representing the administration, but even before then, even when I was here, I've traveled to look at different models of apprenticeships. And registered apprenticeship is really a clear career pathway for any sector, because the framework is just this. It's paid on-the-job training with a mentor that leads to nationally recognized credentials. So that's pretty much, sometimes people overcomplicate it, but really what it is paid on-the-job training with a mentor, with classroom instruction that leads to nationally recognized credentials. And our secretary have really, leaned in, quite frankly, on registered apprenticeships, and really pushed us to think about how can we really scale registered apprenticeships in non-traditional sectors. So we've done, 3 concrete examples that I'll mention that I've been fortunate to help engage and lead on. One of them is we just completed this, towards the holiday, which was a 120-day national cybersecurity sprint. So we were developing registered apprenticeship program for cybersecurity occupations. We worked with the White House. This was, really also engaged by the White House, the Department of Commerce, and other federal agencies. And within 120 days, we developed nearly 200 registered apprenticeship programs in 120 days. And now we're at over about 10,000 new apprentices hired in 120 days. And the reason why I mentioned that as one example, we also did this in trucking. Before the cybersecurity, one of my colleagues, Brent Parton, he's the assistant secretary for ETA. He, with the Office of Apprenticeship, led the trucking challenge, and they also saw those successes. But I think the reason why I want to mention that is because sometimes people say it takes forever to do registered apprenticeships. We can't figure it out. We literally were able to, if you are attaching to an existing program, we're able to get programs up and running within 48 hours, have a program approved within 48 hours. if you're attaching to an existing program. Right. But we wanted to show that government can work at the speed of business, and the secretary wanted to show that. And we had that success in trucking, cybersecurity, and now we're also leading, fortunate to be leading on that work with teachers. We know that across the country, the teacher pipeline is a challenge. There's massive shortages of teachers. And while we know that there's a variety of challenges relating to the within education, registered apprenticeships can be one example. So we've worked with, at that time, the Tennessee, when they were Office of Apprenticeship State, to develop a K-12 teacher occupation to develop registered apprenticeship. And now we have registered apprenticeships in teaching. New York, Tennessee was the first to do it with the OA state, and New York was actually the first overall to do it with an SAA state. The reason why I mentioned that is within a year, we have a third of the states across the country that now have programs for teaching through registered apprenticeships. So, trucking, cybersecurity, teaching, education, those are non-traditional occupations that people may not realize that they can do registered apprenticeships in. And now we have concrete examples, like I said, with the cybersecurity, 200 programs in 120 days developed across the country, 10,000 apprentices, and with a focus on equity, which is we want to make sure, we know that cybersecurity is it really presents a national security risk, quite frankly. We want to make sure that people, could live and work in their communities and get those good jobs as well. And so that's, another component as well. Man, you kind of overwhelmed me with all this, this information, I mean, so much that I felt like I was unaware of. So thank you for providing that. I'll need to listen to the podcast and take some of those notes. So 2 thoughts there, I think, in my response is, I think number one, obviously a lot of resources that are available to establish apprenticeships because people, I think all these different things about apprenticeships, and it's going to be hard, it's going to take this, it's going to take that. When you said in 120 days, you were able to get up, a couple hundred, right? So I think that's phenomenal. The other comment I wanted to make was we have you at a national level in the Department of Labor, obviously in the space of workforce development that I'm sitting here thinking I need to leverage my relationship with you more, right? And reach out to you more. And I know you love this state and have done a lot to serve this state. So that was the other thing. I'm like, we really got to stay more connected because apprenticeships is something that we really need to work, a lot more out here, I think, regionally, locally, particularly with non-traditional apprenticeship programs, some of which you mentioned, cybersecurity in particular. The question I also wanted to ask you as a follow-up is, Nevada hasn't had a great history of, getting federal funds, right? I know this is a bit of a curveball, but any thoughts there, that what can we do better as a state, as, a Southern Nevada region in particular, with the Southern Nevada Local Workforce Development Board? What can we do to, be more competitive, right, for pursuing these federal funding opportunities, particularly as related to apprenticeship? Any thoughts there? Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things come to mind, right? And I do think this applies specific to Nevada, but I do think it applies across the board too. And I think a lot of it is around the partnerships. And I know people say partnerships, but I'll give you a couple of examples. I remember even during my time here when I was executive director at OWIN, the Office of Workforce Innovation, that was created under Governor Sandoval. We within a year, like literally, and I can't remember the exact off the top of my head the exact number, but several $1 million within the time that we were here, and for just a few people agency, we literally had we're successful in getting several $1 million in apprenticeship. So. In apprenticeship and overall competitive grants. But I think that overall, to be competitive, both whether we're talking about apprenticeships and overall, a really, really important element will be the partnerships. Yeah. And the kind of partnership we're talking about are really, I think, 3 components. Our priorities are 3 things at the department. So aligning with the priorities. Yeah. The priorities are around equity, job quality, and partnerships. So those have been our key priorities at the department. So as, the community here are thinking about being competitive for opportunities, think about those 3. How are those being incorporated? Because we know that at the end of the day, and this is, an administration-wide priority around making sure that the work that we're doing in an investment leads to good jobs. Yeah. So I'll just touch up on 3 examples of, or 3 pieces for all 3 of those. On the equity side is about what partnership does the workforce board, or it could be a community college, what partnership they have with organizations that can really speak to and drive equity. That could mean things such as supportive services. That's just something that's a really important component. And I know there's in terms of really the strong role of the workforce boards to drive that. But I do think that a big part of that is developing those partnerships to do that, particularly with, let's say, a community college and with other providers. Yeah. On the job quality component, that partnership there is going to be with employers, employers and the labor community. And the reason why I say that is because at the end of the day, though, what can make someone successful is making sure that at the end of the day, they're at least a good job, right? Yep. And so if someone's able to articulate, we have these partnerships that are with organizations that are employers working with labor, that's able to ensure individuals get good jobs at the end, that right there in and of itself, completely, changes the game in many ways. And then the final piece is the partnership, which is inherent. But I do think, those are, really think about let's say if there's an opportunity, bringing in more, in this instance, I do think is bringing in more people than less, because it ends seeing who does what well. Right. Workforce board, like they're conveners. They understand supportive services. They understand certain components. At the community college, they understand the instruction, the classroom instruction component. Right. The employers in labor, they understand, the apprenticeship, or the state, and working with the, some of the staff or the state apprenticeship agency. They understand those components. The individuals that are successful, I think, are able to bring, and that's also the hard part too, right? The hard part is also just like playing in the same sandbox, right? That's always
liking each other, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's always the harder part. So I'm not saying that naively, I'm not naive to the fact that then you have to figure out who gets what. But I always start with who does what well. Yeah. And I think those kinds of assessment of who done well, but keeping those three things in mind, speaking to equity, speaking to how we're ensuring individuals get good jobs, and then the partnership. I'll also add, just overall awareness is important. And with that, the Department of Labor actually has a new website, that was launched pretty recently last year that everyone should be aware of. It's dol.gov/grants. And the reason why I say that is because this is a new website. And quite a few people may not be aware of this, but this is public information that they should be aware of. Is that it actually publishes future forecasts of grants that was not done before. And so if you go to dol.gov/grants and explore that site, you'll see current opportunities, but then there are future forecasts. And what does that mean? If I'm if I'm checking that out, I'm seeing what's coming down. Yeah. Now I can start getting, the partners together and saying, hey, as opposed to waiting to the last minute. Right. That's right. So I think that I do want to share that resource because I think it's a phenomenal, our staff. And I do want to just, thank our staff. And, I haven't worked in the state, knowing that I think sometime in, something I've heard in leadership before, and I don't remember if I heard it from Dale Urquiaga, just really, a legend here in workforce. But it's sometimes you either get, when things go well, sometimes the leader get more credit than they deserve, but when it goes bad, they get more blame than they deserve.
Usually all the credit, right? All the credit
it's either all or none, right? Or all of it. But the reason why I say that, though, is because we have a phenomenal staff at the Department of Labor, the Employment Training Administration, our career staff. That's really, really been helping to make sure and driving these. Yeah. And that started with, quite frankly, the administration, the Biden-Harris administration, but then the secretary has been driving that down all the way to our front office staff at ETA and all the way to our career staff, our administrators. But they've really been, the ones doing the day-to-day. And some of these pieces, like the grants, the new grant site, I wish it was around when I was there, because I would have been selling, I would have already said, oh, this is coming out. Yeah, yeah. As opposed to when it comes out, and that's when you hear about it, now you have to scramble. Yeah. But imagine strategically, you're engaging on the new the grant side. And the other thing about the grant side, it actually has quite a few other cool functions too, whether it's finding partners, seeing, summary of a past grants and so on and so forth. But I do think the new DOR grant site is something that you should be keeping on your radar because generally the organizations like workforce boards, nonprofits are, generally, prime applicants for those grants. So just preparing, I think that's a big one. Yeah. So now you're ahead of the game to prepare, say, oh, I see this forecast coming up, and now start preparing, start building the partners. And then when you build those partners, going back to like those kind of principles I mentioned, equity, job quality, partnerships, how are you creating good jobs? We have a whole Good Jobs Initiative led with my colleagues with the Good Jobs Initiative. Quite a few of them, Caitlin and Teresa and others. That's really driving this Good Jobs Initiative around what makes a good job. I would also encourage to look at that as well. And that landing page has tons of resources, so many resources to name, and building training programs. And when you're bringing in the employers, when you're talking to the employers, bringing the employers with that lens of a good jobs, that also will,
that's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, again, you dropped a lot of knowledge and awareness for me, and I think that's great for the organization. And I know you had to cover your bases to say this applies to the whole country, not just the region of Nevada, because I'm selfish when it comes to my state, my region. So,
but I just should be right. In terms of,
absolutely. No, thank you for all that. Again, I heard equity, job, quality. The thing you mentioned about partnerships and these forecasted grants, I think is a really great point, because you mentioned, usually we'll see a grant come down the pike and then we're scrambling. You mentioned we're scrambling to find the partners, right? And I know we're really trying to take an approach here at the local board where let's establish these partnerships, great synergy, great flow. Let's like each other, And so when these opportunities come, we're already together. I'm not asking you last minute for a letter of commitment or support. When do you need it, Ricardo? Can you get it to me by tomorrow?
Correct.
Man? Right?
And those letters of commitments, right? When you ask them last minute, they're almost too generic. Right. But if you have a real partnership, you have someone that's committed to employment, and then, key principles of equity and job quality, that in and of itself will see through to say, oh, there's a very serious commitment here. Yeah. So
awesome, Manny. As we wrap up, the last question I want to ask you here, really just is kind of for you to kind of just share what you want here. I think it's, related obviously to your role, but I always like to ask questions like this, like what's on your heart, right? What is it that's on your mind? What's your vision? What's your passion? What would you, envision for our future here as related to the Department of Labor? But the question I want to ask you, what are your hopes for successes, at the Department of Labor for, 2023?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was trying to think about and synthesizing as you asked that, to synthesize it in a succinct way. I think a couple things come to mind in terms of hopes and successes. So at ETA, we have some very key 4 pillars in terms of the ETA, vision. And those core pillars are around building a better care economy, building stronger partnerships, planning for the future of work, and better sector strategies, just in terms of key priorities. Like those are some of our big priorities, future of work, and so on and so forth. But as the ones I mentioned. But in terms of 2023, one thing that's really, really on my mind, and I'm really looking forward to and really want to see is really around our youth work. And we have for the first time in quite a long time, the Department of Labor has a youth strategy. And that youth strategy really centers around some pillars, right? It's a no wrong door approach. No matter where the youth turn, they're able to connect to supportive services, business commitment to youth, young people, and paid work experience. And so paid work-based learning experiences. Those core pillars, our department, I have some, again, great colleagues, Stephanie, in our leadership with Brent, Assistant Secretary, been really driving this. Yeah. And I think for 2023, what I'd want to see is scale in terms of some of our programs and some of the successes of our programs, whether it's our Job Corps 2.0 initiative around we're providing deeper, more meaningful technical assistance. So I think if I had to summarize it, what are some three key things? One is we're doing a lot of cross-agency collaboration at the federal level with Department of Education, Commerce, Transportation on the infrastructure. I didn't even go into all of that side of the infrastructure and some of the cross collaboration. Yeah. But what I would love to see for success is the way that we're collaborating at the federal level. We're working with Treasury for IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the implementation of that. I'd love to see that trickle down to make sure at the state and local level, so that I think if you talk to a lot of our federal staff, you'll see a lot of alignment. But it's kind of like the telephone game, right? You pass it to this person, you go to the next person. What I'd like to see is that if I come down to the local level, I see the same kind of collaboration, and you're aware of the work that's happening at the federal level, the same way that we're working cross-agency at the federal level. I'd love to see that, one, the message, the information, the partnership, I'd love to see that trickle down all to the state and local level. So that's a big one. Yeah. Number two is the youth component that I mentioned, which is wanting to see more scale and opportunities for our young people, as you know, and we both share this passion, making sure that our young adults have great opportunities, particularly around paid work experiences. We do see that as an important piece. So I think that's number two, and then number three, I would just say continuing to expand around the work that we're doing around registered apprenticeships in non-traditional sectors. Quite frankly, in scale, and really continuing to highlight those examples, and working with the state and locals, and I always try to look at the work from the lens of, I used to be at the state and working closely with the locals, and had a phenomenal relationship with Workforce Connection, and love to see more of those partnerships. And on the flip side, I want to hear more about some of the great things that's happening at the local level too. I never want to get kind of removed and be like, I'm just out of touch. And I always remind people, I just moved to DC, so I'm still not in it yet. But I'd love to be able to continue to also, on the flip side, be aware of what's happening at the local level. So, and elevating those examples, because I think at the federal level, I have the opportunity, like some of the great things that's happening at Workforce Connections or a local board here, the San Diego partnership in Prince George County. I'm hearing in all of those, but I could also share it vice versa and make those connection points. So I think it's more than one thing, but quite a few things that I'm hoping for. Yeah, Manny, that's great. I appreciate that. Everything from the cross-agency collaboration at the federal level, and like you said, that influencing how we collaborate at the state level and the local level. Because I always like to think, together we can do more. We can go farther, do it better, and share the collective solution instead of blaming, this agency or that agency. As far as expanding registered apprenticeships, I know that's number 3 that you mentioned. And I just appreciate all the knowledge and awareness you provided in this podcast, because, again, I wasn't aware of a lot of those resources, and we do this to provide that kind of awareness to the community, right? And to be able to bring this information to them as, our audience listens to this podcast. And not only us, but, as you mentioned, this is an opportunity for other areas around the country to benefit from as well, because we have the privilege of having you here today. Right. So, thank you for that. And I think, of course, the last thing, as you mentioned, and we start off with our mutual passion for youth. Here in Southern Nevada, we have 46,000 disconnected youth. And so we're launching an initiative to do some system collaboratives, with a variety of system partners, right? Like the school district, the city of Las Vegas, the county, DHHS, DWSS. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And where our approach is, all of us are doing things with youth, right? And we're somewhat aware of it, but I think this convening is really this idea of how can we come together, have greater awareness of what we're doing now, and how do we want to move this thing forward together? Because, like as you mentioned, there's no wrong door for our youth, right? And providing them opportunities such as WEX's, and as you mentioned, we can't do it without the business community, without the employers, providing opportunities for our incredibly talented, phenomenal youth in this community. And so it's again, that going back to doing it together. Absolutely. So
Again, I want to thank you so much for your time and for you joining us today, for, you continuing to stay connected, to Nevada, to Southern Nevada. One thing I told myself in my mind is I'm going to be deliberate and intentional about reaching out to you, taking advantage of the fact that you were here now at that level, having the influences that you have, Manny. So thank you for continuing to champion, workforce development. Thank you for continuing to care about our local community and, for doing the work you do, man. Keep doing great things. Keep kicking butt, stay passionate, keep doing jiu-jitsu. And then maybe we can close this session out with a little, with a takedown or something, right? No, but to tremendously respect you, admire you, and in so many ways look up to you, Manny. So thank you for doing what you do.
I'm humbled. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much. And keep up the great work here. Seriously, keep up the great work. So
thank you, man. Thank you, man. So that concludes our podcast here for Workforce Connections with Manny Lamarre, Senior Advisor to the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you take as much out of it as I have, and we look forward to seeing some things implemented here locally. So thank you. Here with Manny Lamarre again for our Against the Wall segment. Man, excited to do this part for you. This is kind of a lighthearted part. It gets us to know you on a more personal level, and for our audience to get to know you as well. Again, now that we share the very informative session with you. So I'm going to just ask you some questions.
Nice. And
just fire off your answers as I fire off these questions.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
This first segment is about your favorites.
Oh.
Okay. So you ready?
Yes.
All right. Do it. Don't take too much time. Just let us know.
All right.
Your favorite food?
Easy. Rice and beans. I'm Haitian. I grew up in Haiti. Anything rice and beans. Rice, beans, with some either griot. My body is 75% rice and beans and griot.
Okay. All right. Your favorite movie?
I don't have one favorite movie, but I have The Wire. In terms of series, The Wire, you can't go wrong with The Wire.
The Wire. Okay. Favorite book?
Anything by I quite a few. The Alchemist.
The
Alchemist. That's a really good one.
That's Alchemist. A good
if you
one.
haven't read it. The Alchemist. I love it.
Now be very. Think about this one. Your favorite city to visit?
To visit though. That's a hard. So I'm assuming that Vegas is not a visit because Vegas is kind of like home.
Okay. So good answer.
I would quite honestly say Miami or Vegas in the wintertime. Miami in the wintertime, Vegas in the springtime.
Okay.
Because of the weather. You can't beat a Vegas spring or a Miami winter.
Okay. Favorite subject in school?
Easy, philosophy.
Interesting.
Philosophy and like math, but philosophy.
Favorite sport in school?
In school?
In school.
I played both track, football, and wrestled, but I loved all three almost equally.
But if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick one, I'll say football.
Wrong answer. Try again. Wrestling, right.
Exactly. Wrestling was great. It was just, man, that training for wrestling is...
Yeah, it's different.
It's not for the...
Here you go, Manny. Favorite artist or musical group?
Easy. Tupac Shakur, the greatest. And then his poetry book, The Rose That Grew from the Concrete, I used to literally read that as a kid.
Okay.
And that's how I started writing and got into writing, which I actually think leads into policy because it helps me reflect on what I'm writing and thinking about.
Wow.
Tupac
awesome.
Shakur. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite holiday?
New Year's. And that's mainly because college football.
Okay.
It's a full day of college football.
Yeah.
New Year's 6 bowl games on the 31st and then the 1st. That's... Yeah.
Okay. Favorite sports team?
Miami Hurricanes. I don't have a professional sports team that I'm like really hardcore with.
Yeah.
The Miami Hurricanes, just growing up back in the day with, like the Ed Reeds and, the old school guys in the 2000s.
Okay.
So
there's about 20 more. So I'm going to just drop these on you real quick. This one is tough choices. Okay. Mm-hmm. So just pick one or the other. Vacation or staycation?
Staycation.
Drive to your vacation spot or fly?
Fly.
Hotel or Airbnb?
Airbnb.
Coffee or tea?
A coffee.
Wine or beer?
Beer.
Cooking at home or eating at a restaurant?
Eating at a restaurant, but cooking at home if my wife is making it.
Okay.
She's
Good
cooking.
answer. Good
She's
answer. Give or owe money or owe a favor?
Ooh. Money, because money is very concrete. Oh, favor, I don't know what it could be.
Right. Justice or grace?
Justice.
Actions or words?
Actions.
Boxing or wrestling?
Wrestling.
Gotta throw that one in there. And then this last segment is finish the sentence. Okay. If Manny could live anywhere, it would be?
On an island.
The best part of living in Nevada was?
The weather.
Manny's favorite thing about his job is?
The people.
If Manny could travel back in time, he would travel to?
Nowhere.
If Manny could grapple with anyone, it would be?
John DANAHER.
And 3 words that describe Manny are?
I guess I'll just go with my favorite quote, which is that Maya Angelou, my mission in life is not only to thrive, but to survive. I'm not just trying to survive, but to thrive with passion, compassion, humor, and style. So I think passion, humor, and style.
Awesome. And then the last one for you today, Manny, is doing the WC podcast here with us today was?
Amazing. And reflecting, like allowed me to reflect.